The plan had been in motion for 6 weeks before I even knew there was a plan. I found out later, much later, after the attorneys had finished and the dust had settled, that my son-in-law had started making calls in early October. Quiet calls. The kind you make when you think no one is listening. He'd spoken to a real estate agent in Asheville, a financial advisor in Charlotte, and a woman at my bank whose name I still don't know. By the time Thanksgiving came around and he sat down at my dining room table, carved my turkey, and told me he loved me like a second mother, he had already decided what to do with my house. I'm 71 years old. I've lived in this house for 34 years. My husband Harold, built the deck off the back with his own hands the summer our daughter turned 12. He measured every board twice, drove every nail himself, and stood back and looked at it the way men look at things they've made and loved. He died of a heart attack in the driveway 4 years ago, coming home from a grocery run. Milk and paper towels in the back seat. That's the detail I keep coming back to. Milk and paper towels. After that, the house felt very large and very quiet. But it was mine, every corner of it. And I was not about to let anyone take it from me, not even my own daughter. Let me back up. My daughter's name is Vivian. She's 43, beautiful, smart, in the way that makes people underestimate her until she's already gotten what she wanted. She married a man named Troy 8 years ago. Troy sells commercial real estate. He's good at it. He knows how to look at a property and see not what it is, but what it could be, which, I've come to understand, is how he also looks at people. For the first few years, things were fine. Sunday dinners, holiday visits, the usual rhythm of a family trying to stay connected across distance. They lived 40 minutes away in a newer development, one of those neighborhoods where all the houses look alike and the lawns are maintained by a service. I visited when invited. I didn't interfere. I thought that was enough. Then Harold died, and everything shifted. I don't blame Vivian for worrying about me. I really don't. She called more often, came by more, started showing up on Saturdays to help with yard work I hadn't asked for help with. I appreciated it, mostly. But somewhere in the second year after his death, the worry started to curdle into something else. She began making small comments about the stairs, about the size of the house, about how a woman my age shouldn't be managing a 4-bedroom property alone. A woman my age. I'm 71, not 90. I drive myself to appointments. I have friends. I take a yoga class on Wednesday mornings at the community center. I am not someone who needs to be managed. But Troy had a different view, and Troy, as it turned out, had been doing math. I first noticed something was off at Christmas last year. We were sitting in the living room after dinner, and Troy made an offhand comment about property values in my neighborhood. How much the houses had appreciated, how different the area had become. He said it casually, the way you'd mention the weather. But he was watching me when he said it. I noticed that. I filed it away. Then in February, Vivian asked if I had ever considered downsizing. I said no. She said she just wanted me to be comfortable, that the house was a lot to maintain, that maybe a condo closer to her would be nice, that she and Troy had actually driven past a few places they thought I might like. I said no again. She dropped it. But Troy didn't. By spring, the conversations had gotten specific. Troy started mentioning numbers. What the house might list for. What my monthly expenses would look like in a smaller place. How I could invest the difference and have a very comfortable income for the rest of my life. He had clearly thought about this more than I had. He brought a folder to Easter dinner, an actual folder, with printouts. I looked at those printouts. Then I looked at my daughter. Then I looked at him. I said, Troy, I'm not selling my home. He smiled the way he smiles. Patient, practiced, like he was dealing with a client who just needed more information. He said he understood, that there was no pressure, that this was just something to think about. 3 days later, he called my bank. I didn't know that yet, but I will get to that. Spring turned into summer. The conversations continued, low-grade and persistent, like a slow leak. Vivian started coming over more frequently, and I started to dread her visits. which is an awful thing to feel about your own child. She would walk through the house and make suggestions. New fixtures, better lighting, neutral paint for when I was ready to sell. When I was ready. Not if, when. I started keeping notes. I don't know exactly why I started doing it then. Some instinct. I wrote down dates and what was said and who was in the room. I kept the notebook in the drawer of my nightstand, next to Harold's watch, and my reading glasses. Just notes. Just dates. In August, I called my attorney. His name is Robert Kinsley. He handled Harold's estate, and he is the kind of man who speaks slowly and means everything he says. I told him what had been happening, the conversations, the folder, the phone calls, the gentle, unrelenting pressure. He listened without interrupting. When I was finished, he said, "Vivian, has anyone asked you to sign anything?" I said, "Not yet." He said, "Call me when they do." He also suggested I update my estate documents, which we did, and he told me to check something I had never thought to check, whether anyone had made inquiries about my property or financial accounts. I made some calls of my own after that. What I found took my breath away. My bank had received a call in February, around the same time Vivian first mentioned downsizing, from someone claiming to be calling on my behalf to ask about the process for adding a cosigner to my accounts. The call had been flagged as unusual and not processed, but it had been made. When I asked for details, they couldn't give me a name, but they gave me enough. I also learned that someone had pulled a public record inquiry on my property title, which is legal. Anyone can do that. But combined with everything else, it painted a picture I didn't want to see. I didn't say anything to Vivian. Not yet. I updated my locks. I updated my estate documents with Robert. I installed a security camera system, 3 cameras covering the front, back, and side entrances, with cloud storage I could access from my phone. I did this quietly without mentioning it to anyone. Then I waited. The invitation came in early October. Vivian called to say she and Troy were hosting Thanksgiving this year. Just the two of them and me, something small and cozy. They wanted to spend real time together. I said that sounded lovely. I meant it, partly. I still loved my daughter. I want to be clear about that. I still love her now. I arrived at their house on Thanksgiving at noon. The table was set beautifully. Vivian had made a centerpiece out of fall leaves and candles, the way she used to do when she was a girl helping me decorate. For a moment, standing in her doorway, I felt a pang of something close to grief. For the relationship we used to have, for the mother and daughter we used to be to each other. Then Troy sat me down before the food was even on the table, and he put a document in front of me. It was a financial power of attorney, broad and general, and, I knew immediately from my conversation with Robert, extremely dangerous in the wrong hands. It would have given Troy and Vivian joint authority over my financial decisions, bank accounts, my investments, my property. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I looked at Vivian. She said, "Mom, it's just for protection, in case something happens to you." I asked what she thought was going to happen to me. She said, "You're alone in that house. You're getting older. We just want to be able to help if you can't." I said, "Can't what, Vivian?" Troy said in a very measured voice that this was not about control. It was about love. It was about family taking care of family. I asked if he had called my bank in February. The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. Vivian said she didn't know what I was talking about. She may have been telling the truth. I don't know. What I know is that Troy's jaw tightened, and he looked away, and then looked back at me and said that he had simply been gathering information, that he was trying to help. I said, "I won't be signing this." He said, "Mom." He calls me Mom, which I have never asked him to do. "You're being irrational. This is what responsible families do." I said I was not his mother and I was not being irrational. Vivian started to cry. She said I was making this harder than it needed to be, that they were only trying to look out for me, that I never trusted her, that I had never really let her in, and then she said something she cannot take back. She said that Harold had always been my favorite, that she had always known it, that I had always cared more about that house than about her. I sat very still. Then Troy stood up from the table and said, "That fine. If I wanted to be this way, they would have to reconsider whether they had the time and energy to keep worrying about me the way they had been." I said that seemed like a reasonable decision for them to make. He said I was being selfish. There it was. The word. The same word people use when they want to make you feel that protecting yourself is a moral failure. I picked up my purse. I said I was going to leave now. Vivian said, "Please don't go, please." And I could hear that she meant it, that underneath all of it, she was still my daughter and she was frightened and confused, and I don't think she fully understood what her husband had been doing. I believe that. I have to believe it. But I left anyway. I drove home. I called Robert from the car. I told him what had happened, the document, the power of attorney, the things that were said. He told me to come in Monday morning. I said I would. When I got home, I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table where Harold and I had eaten thousands of meals. I looked at the photograph on the refrigerator. The two of us on the deck he built, the summer before he got sick, squinting into the afternoon sun. I talked to him for a little while. I do that sometimes. I think he would have had some choice things to say about Troy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and thought about the document, about the call to the bank, about the folder of printouts at Easter. I thought about how long this had been building while I had smiled and passed the rolls and pretended not to see it clearly. I saw it now. Monday morning, I met with Robert. We went through everything. The notes I'd been keeping since spring, the bank inquiry, the title search, the power of attorney document that I had photographed on my phone before I left Thanksgiving. Robert reviewed it all with the careful attention he brings to everything, and then he looked up and said, "This is actually quite serious." He said the power of attorney, if I had signed it, would have given them effective control over my ability to sell or refinance my property. He said the bank inquiry, combined with the title search, suggested a pattern of planning that warranted legal attention. He recommended we send a formal letter. We sent the letter. It arrived at Vivian and Troy's house the Wednesday before Christmas. Vivian called me that afternoon. She was crying. She said she hadn't known about the bank call. She said Troy had told her he was just doing research. She said she thought the power of attorney was standard, that Troy had said it was what everyone does, that she hadn't understood what she was asking me to sign. I listened. I said, "Vivian, I believe you didn't understand the full picture. But you were in that room. You watched me be pressured, and you said I was making things harder than they needed to be." She didn't say anything for a long moment. I said, "I need some time." She said, "Okay, Mom. That was 3 weeks ago. Troy has not called me." Robert sent a follow-up letter this week confirming that no further inquiries have been made regarding my accounts or property, and that the estate documents are in order. I have a will, a revocable living trust, a healthcare directive, and a durable power of attorney already assigned to my friend Patricia, who has known me for 30 years and wants nothing from me except my company on Tuesday afternoons when we watch old movies and eat too much popcorn. My house is mine. My name is on the deed, and it will stay there until I decide otherwise, which may be never, because Harold built the deck with his own hands, and I intend to sit on it for as many springs as I have left. I have been thinking about what I would say to other women in my position. Women who love their children and feel guilty for having limits. Women who are told that protecting themselves is the same as being selfish. Women who have been made to feel that their age is a vulnerability to be managed, rather than a life that belongs entirely to them. I would say this: your home is yours. Your money is yours. Your name on a document means something. Guard it like it means something. Love does not require you to hand over your autonomy. And if someone who claims to love you is asking for your signature on something you don't fully understand, the right answer is always to wait, to call a lawyer, and to trust the instinct that told you to keep notes in a notebook in your nightstand drawer. That instinct is not paranoia. That instinct is wisdom. It took me 34 years in this house and 4 years of grief and one Thanksgiving dinner to understand the difference. I sat on Harold's deck last Sunday. It was cold, the kind of cold that comes in December when the sky goes white and still and you can smell wood smoke from somewhere down the street. I brought a blanket and my tea and I stayed out there longer than was probably sensible. I wasn't ready to go in,